I'll pay for the wedding, I said. And for the first time in months, my mother smiled at me like I was useful again. What she didn't know was that my name had been forged onto every contract, every invoice, every final payment form for my sister's wedding to the man who had cheated on me. They thought I was still the quiet daughter who would swallow humiliation to keep the family looking perfect. So I nodded. Took every vendor email they sent me, read the fine print, and waited until the night before the ceremony to make one phone call that changed everything. My mother sent me the wedding invoice at 6:14 inches the morning with one sentence underneath it. You owe your sister this much after ruining her engagement party. The total was $48. Senbai Shitsi? The groom's name on the invoice was the same man who had slept beside me for 3 years. Promised me a future. And then got my younger sister pregnant behind my back. I stared at that number in my tiny kitchen in Portland and laughed so quietly it scared me. My name is Claire Whitaker. I'm 34 years old. And I work as an operations manager for a regional hotel group, which means I spend my days reading contracts, negotiating vendor penalties, and catching expensive mistakes before they destroy an event. My family always treated that skill like it was just another boring detail about me. Something useful only when they needed a discount, a reservation, or someone calm enough to fix their chaos. My sister, Madison, was the golden child before she even learned to spell her own name. She was the daughter who cried prettier, smiled softer, and somehow turned every disaster into proof that she needed protecting. I was the practical one, the oldest, the steady one, the one my parents said could handle more because I didn't collapse in public. That was the story they built around me. And for years, I mistook it for love. The groom was Tyler Brooks, my ex-fiancé. Not ex-boyfriend. Ex-fiancé. There had been a ring, a booked photographer, a deposit on a small vineyard venue outside Hood River, and a half-written list of songs I wanted played at our reception. I had loved him in the ordinary, trusting way people love before betrayal teaches them to look under every sentence for the hidden blade. He didn't leave me with honesty. He left me with a pregnancy announcement at Sunday dinner. Madison held his hand across my parents' dining table while my mother served pot roast like we were discussing weather. Tyler couldn't look at me. My father cleared his throat and said, "Claire, we know this is hard. But the baby changes things." That was the first time I realized my pain was being treated as an inconvenience to their celebration. Not a wound. Not a betrayal. A scheduling problem. Madison cried into a linen napkin and said she never meant for it to happen. Tyler whispered that he was confused. That we had been distant. That Madison understood him in a way I didn't. My mother rubbed my sister's back like Madison had been the one cheated on. Then she looked at me and said, "You're strong, sweetheart. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be." I remember the exact sound my fork made when I set it down. I didn't scream. I didn't throw wine. I didn't slap anyone. Though every person at that table probably deserved the shock of seeing me finally become inconvenient. I simply asked one question. "How long?" Tyler blinked. Madison sobbed louder. And my father said, "Details won't help." That was when I knew the details were bad. People only call the truth unnecessary when it makes them look guilty. 3 weeks later, my mother called to tell me Madison and Tyler were getting married before the baby came. She said it like she was announcing a charity fundraiser. "It's the right thing to do," she told me. "The family needs stability." I had been engaged to Tyler for 11 months. But suddenly, his marriage to my sister was a moral emergency. My heartbreak had an expiration date. Their reputation did not. I moved out of the apartment Tyler and I had shared and into a one-bedroom near my office, with thin walls and a heater that clicked all night. I packed my half of our life, while Tyler stood in the doorway, asking if I had seen his passport. Not apologizing. Not helping. Asking about his passport. I found it in a drawer beneath our honeymoon brochures and handed it to him without a word. My parents didn't help me move. My father said he didn't want to take sides. My mother said Madison was too fragile to be upset right now. That became the family rule. Madison could be fragile. Tyler could be confused. My parents could be overwhelmed. I could be strong. Strength. In my family. It meant everyone else got to step on you and then praise you for not bleeding on the carpet. For months, I kept my distance. I ignored the family group chat when Madison posted ultrasound photos with Tyler's hand on her belly. I blocked Tyler after he sent me a message that said, "I hope one day you can be happy for us." I didn't answer my mother when she told me bitterness would age me. I went to work. I paid my bills. I learned how grief changes shape when nobody acknowledges it. Then the wedding planning started to fall apart. Madison wanted a luxury waterfront venue. Tyler wanted an open bar. My parents wanted the kind of wedding that would convince everyone there had been no scandal. Only a beautiful family adjustment. The problem was that Tyler had student loans. Madison had never held a job longer than 8 months. And my parents had refinanced their house twice to keep up appearances. That was when they remembered I existed. Not as a daughter. As a solution. My mother invited me to brunch at a restaurant she knew I liked. Which should have been my warning. She wore pearls. Ordered tea. And waited until the server walked away before saying, "We need to talk about the wedding." I looked at her across the table and felt my stomach go cold before she even finished the sentence. She told me Madison was stressed. She told me Tyler's family was not stepping up. She told me my father's retirement accounts were complicated right now. Then she folded her hands and said, "Since you and Tyler had already saved money for a wedding, it would be healing for you to contribute it toward theirs." Healing. She used that word like she hadn't just asked me to fund the celebration of my own humiliation. I asked her if she heard herself. She sighed. Disappointed. Like I was being dramatic in a public place. "Claire. You canceled your wedding. That money was already set aside. Madison is your sister. And this baby is innocent." I remember staring at the little silver spoon beside her teacup. I focused on it because if I looked at her face too long, I was afraid I would finally say something that couldn't be unsaid. I told her the money was mine. I told her Tyler had forfeited any claim to it when he betrayed me. I told her Madison could have a courthouse wedding if they couldn't afford anything else. My mother's expression hardened in a way I knew too well. It was the look she gave me whenever I stopped being useful. "You've always been jealous of her," she said softly. "This is exactly why Tyler drifted." That sentence did something to me. Not because it was true, but because she wanted it to hurt. She wanted me to defend myself, to cry, to beg her to see me. Instead, I stood up, put cash on the table for my coffee, and left before the food arrived. Behind me, my mother said my name in that sharp whisper women use when they want control without making a scene. After that, the pressure became organized. My father called and said family was about sacrifice. Madison left me voicemails that started with crying and ended with accusations. Tyler sent one email with the subject line, "Can we be adults?" and wrote that paying for the wedding would show everyone I had moved on. I saved that email in a folder labeled Tyler, because I had learned that people who rewrite history usually provide evidence by accident. The first invoice arrived 2 days later. Not a request. An invoice. My parents had listed me as the responsible party for the venue balance. Catering, deposit. Floral upgrade. And even the string quartet Madison had chosen after seeing it on Instagram. My name was typed cleanly on the billing line. As if my consent had been just another decoration they could arrange. That was when my old professional instincts woke up. I called the venue manager. Not as a daughter. Not as a betrayed ex-fiancée. But as a woman who knew exactly how event contracts worked. I asked for a copy of the signed agreement. The manager hesitated. Then confirmed my email address because my name was on the financial authorization form. When the contract arrived, I opened it at my desk during lunch and read every line twice. My parents had forged my initials on 3 pages. They had not just asked me to pay. They had made me responsible. Cancellation fees. Damage charges. Final head count. overtime labor, alcohol minimums. All of it had been placed under my name. The signature wasn't mine, but it was close enough to fool someone who didn't know the way I crossed my T's. I sat there in the break room with a plastic fork in my hand and felt something inside me go very still. That night, I drove to my parents' house for the first time in months. Madison's wedding binder was spread across the kitchen island, thick with blush-colored tabs and printed Pinterest photos. Tyler was there, leaning against the counter, drinking my father's bourbon like he belonged. Madison wore a white sweater and kept touching her stomach whenever she wanted the room to soften around her. My mother smiled when I walked in, because she thought I had come to surrender. "I'll pay," I said. The whole kitchen went quiet. My father's shoulders dropped in relief. Madison covered her mouth and started crying. Instantly. Beautifully. Tyler finally looked at me. And for 1 second, I saw triumph pass across his face before he rearranged it into gratitude. My mother reached for my hand and said, "I knew you'd do the right thing." I let her squeeze my fingers. I even nodded. Then she slid the binder toward me and showed me the schedule. Rehearsal dinner Friday. Wedding Saturday. Final payments due Thursday. "We just need you to confirm everything with the vendors," she said. "You're so good at that." There it was. The old family spell. "You're so good at that." A compliment sharpened into a leash. I smiled in a way none of them understood and said, "Send me every contract." They did. Every single one. Venue. Catering. Florist. Rentals. Photographer. Dessert table. Valet parking. My mother forwarded the emails with little heart emojis, like she had not committed fraud with my name. Madison texted me pictures of chair covers and asked which one looked more forgiving. Tyler sent me a beer list and wrote, "Thanks for being mature." I saved everything. I printed everything. I highlighted dates. Closes. Signatures. Refund windows. And authorization rules. By the end of that week, I understood exactly what they had done and exactly how to undo it. They had chosen vendors I knew professionally, assumed my quietness meant weakness, and failed to read the simplest clause in the main venue contract. The person financially responsible had full cancellation authority up until 5 p.m. the night before the event. They had put my name on the contract to trap me. Instead, they had handed me the key. I didn't cancel anything that day. Not yet. I went to work, answered emails, approved room blocks, and listened to clients complain about linen colors. At home, I placed every printed contract in a black folder on my kitchen table. Then I opened Tyler's old email, Madison's voicemails, my mother's invoice message, and the scanned forms with my forged initials. For the first time in a year, I wasn't shaking. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday at 4. On Friday morning, my mother sent a photo of Madison's veil hanging in the guest room where I used to sleep when I came home from college. Under it, she wrote, "Today is about grace." I looked at that message for a long time. Then I picked up the phone, called the venue, and asked for the cancellation department by name. The venue coordinator's name was Denise, and I knew her from 3 corporate retreats my hotel group had hosted the year before. She had a calm voice, the kind people use when they have handled drunk groomsmen, missing centerpieces, and mothers-in-law with clipboards. When I told her I needed to discuss cancellation authority on the Whitaker Brooks wedding, she paused just long enough to let me know she understood something was wrong. "I have you listed as the financially responsible party," she said carefully. "Is that correct?" I looked at the scanned contract open on my laptop. At my forged initials beside the clause my parents had never bothered to read. "That's what your paperwork says," I replied. "But before I make any decision, I need you to confirm the authorization requirements in writing." She did. Within 4 minutes, an email arrived. The policy was clear. Until 5 p.m. On the day before the event, the financially responsible party could cancel services tied to the venue package. The deposit would be forfeited. But the outstanding balance, car minimum, security fee, valet, staffing, and catering charges would be stopped. It was the kind of clause nobody noticed when they were choosing chandeliers and tasting rosemary chicken. I noticed it because my family had trained me to survive by reading small print. I did not cancel immediately. I sat at my kitchen table with the black folder open and made a list of every person who had placed my name on something without asking me. My mother had sent the first invoice. My father had signed a payment authorization on my behalf. Madison had forwarded floral upgrades with the note. Claire approved. Tyler had emailed the bar vendor directly. Writing. Her card will cover the difference. That line stayed with me. Her card will cover the difference. Not Claire's. Not my ex-fiancé's. To her. I was no longer a person to him. I was an account. A leftover resource from the woman he had betrayed. He had moved from my bed to my sister's nursery plans without ever learning the difference between remorse and inconvenience. Somehow, reading his words hurt less than hearing his apology would have. Adan sprzecha trezit shishapta. M. My mother called. I let it ring twice before answering. She sounded bright. Almost girlish. In a way she never sounded when discussing my life. Did you get everything handled? She asked. Behind her voice, I heard Madison laughing and someone rustling garment bags. I'm reviewing final terms, I said. Good, Mom replied. Please don't make us chase you today. Your sister cannot handle stress. There it was again. Your sister cannot handle stress. As if stress were a delicate illness only Madison could catch. While I had been born immune to humiliation, I looked at the ultrasound photo Madison had texted weeks earlier. Not because I wanted it, but because she had sent it with the caption, "Hope this helps you forgive." I had stared at that tiny gray image then and wondered how adults could hide behind a baby who had not even been born. My father called next. He skipped hello. Your mother says you're dragging your feet. I could picture him standing in the garage. Lowering his voice like decency was something neighbors might overhear. He said the wedding had already been announced. Relatives were driving in. And backing out now would embarrass the family. Dad, I said. Did you sign my name on the venue authorization? Silence sat between us like a locked door. He did not deny it. That was the part I still remember. He sitted. Then said, We did what was necessary to keep this family from falling apart. I closed my eyes and felt a strange calm settle over me. Not peace. Something harder. So fraud was necessary, I asked. His voice sharpened. Don't use dramatic words with me. You know we always intended to work it out with you. Work it out. That meant corner me after the fact. It meant make the mess public enough that refusing would look cruel. It meant use Madison's pregnancy, Tyler's shame, and my lifelong training as the reasonable daughter to force me into paying for an event I never agreed to fund. My father had taught me to ride a bike, change a tire, balance a checkbook. He had also taught me exactly how little my consent mattered when Madison wanted something. By noon, I had confirmation emails from the venue, caterer, rentals company, and florist. The photographer had a separate contract under my parents' names. So I left that alone. The cake was paid in full by Madison's godmother. So I left that too. I was not trying to destroy everything. That distinction mattered to me. Even if nobody else would see it. I was only removing my stolen name and my stolen money from their celebration. At Doipai Sprzechepa. M. I sent one email to Denise. I wrote that I was exercising cancellation authority as the listed responsible party. Effective immediately. For the venue space, catering package, bar service, valet, rentals, and all associated labor scheduled for Saturday. I asked for written confirmation that no additional balance would be charged to me. My hands were steady until I clicked send. Then they shook so badly I had to set them flat on the table. Denise called 7 minutes later. Claire, she said quietly. I need to make sure you understand the practical result. I appreciated that she did not lecture me. She just told me the truth. No ballroom. No plated dinner. No staff. No chairs. No linens. No ceremony setup. I understand, I said. She exhaled. Given the signature concerns you mentioned earlier, I'm documenting all communication carefully. That was the first kindness anyone had shown me in this entire mess. At Patru Patruzet Shishasa P.M. 15 minutes before the deadline, I received the final cancellation confirmation. I printed it, placed it in the black folder, and made a second copy for my car. Then I turned off my phone, not because I was afraid, because I wanted 1 hour of silence before the explosion. I washed my coffee mug, folded a blanket on the couch, and watched the late afternoon light move across my apartment floor like nothing had changed. The first voicemail came at 5:22 p.m. My mother. Her voice was breathless and high. All pearls stripped away. Claire. Call me right now. The venue says there's been a mistake. The second came from Madison, sobbing so loudly I could barely hear words. The third was Tyler. And his was different. Controlled. Angry. This isn't funny. Whatever point you're trying to make, undo it. That one made me smile without meaning to. I did not call back. I listened to each voicemail once, and saved them. My mother accused me of cruelty. Madison said I was trying to hurt her baby. Tyler said I had embarrassed him in front of his friends. My father said he had never been more disappointed in me. Nobody said, we forged your name. Nobody said, we were wrong. Not one person asked what they had done to make me choose silence over rescue. At Shastre Prey. My mother pounded on my apartment door. I knew it was her before she spoke, because nobody else knocked, like they were trying to claim ownership of the wood. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing in the hallway in a champagne-colored dress, hair half-pinned, phone clutched in one hand. My father stood behind her with a face like stone. Tyler was there too. Madison, thankfully, was not. Open this door, my mother said. I opened it with the chain still latched. Her eyes dropped to the chain, then back to me. That tiny piece of brass offended her more than anything I had said. Fix this, she demanded. The rehearsal dinner is in 2 hours. Guests are already in town. I looked past her at Tyler, who had the nerve to look betrayed. You put my name on contracts without my consent, I said. My father stepped forward. We are not doing this in a hallway. I did not move the chain. Then leave. My mother's mouth opened like I had slapped her. Tyler finally spoke. Claire. Come on. You know Madison can't handle this right now. Hearing him use my sister's fragility as a weapon in my doorway made the last soft part of me close. Madison handled sleeping with my fiancé, I said. She can handle finding a restaurant. My mother hissed my name. Horrified. As if the sin had been me saying it aloud. Tyler's face flushed dark red. My father glanced down the hallway. Worried more about neighbors than truth. That was my family in one picture, my mother protecting Madison. Tyler protecting himself. My father protecting appearances. And me standing behind a chain lock. Finally protecting myself. It should have felt dramatic. It mostly felt overdue. My mother tried a different voice then. Lower and wounded. I don't recognize you. It was meant to hurt. For most of my life. It would have. I would have panicked at the thought of becoming a daughter she could not approve of. But that night, her words landed differently. That makes sense, I said. You only recognize me when I'm paying for something. Fixing something. Or swallowing something. My father told me I was tearing the family apart. I told him the family had been tearing at me for years and calling the sound tradition. Tyler said I was punishing an unborn child. I told him the child was not responsible for his choices. But neither was I. My mother said the deposit was gone. I told her that was unfortunate. She said people would ask questions. I told her maybe. For once, she should answer them honestly. The hallway went silent after that. My mother looked at me with a kind of shock I had never seen before. Not because she finally understood my pain. Because she understood her power had stopped working. There is a specific moment when a manipulator realizes guilt no longer opens the door. It is small. Almost invisible. A blink. A tightened jaw. A hand lowering from the knob. I saw it. And I knew I would remember it. They left after my father muttered that I would regret this. Tyler stayed 1 second longer than the others. You loved me once, he said. Like that was still currency. I looked at the man who had taken my trust, my plans, my sister, and almost my money, and felt nothing romantic at all. That's why you should have known better than to steal from me, I said. Then I closed the door. The wedding did not happen at the waterfront venue the next day. I learned that from my cousin Erin, the only relative who texted me without calling me evil first. She wrote, I don't know what they did, but Aunt Linda is telling everyone you had a breakdown and sabotaged the wedding out of jealousy. Underneath, she sent a screenshot of Madison's post, a black and white photo of her veil. The caption read, Some people cannot stand seeing others loved. I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. Some people cannot stand seeing others loved. It was elegant, poisonous, and exactly the kind of lie people share when they want sympathy without context. In the comments, family friends offered prayers. Tyler's co-workers called me unstable without using my name. My mother commented 3 white hearts. The story had changed again. And this time, they had taken it public. That was when I opened the black folder and added a new section. Screenshots, timestamps, voicemails, contract, scans, cancellation, confirmations. My family thought the wedding was the battlefield. They thought I had already fired the only shot I had. But I knew something they didn't. When people build a lie in public, they create the perfect place for the truth to arrive. By Sunday morning, Madison's post had been shared by 3 cousins, 2 of my mother's church friends, and 1 woman I had never met who wrote, Evil sisters always reveal themselves before blessings arrive. I read that one while standing in line for coffee, holding my phone in one hand and my debit card in the other. The barista asked if I was okay. I smiled automatically and said yes. Because women like me get very good at bleeding politely. I did not respond online. That disappointed people more than outrage would have. Silence leaves room for others to imagine they are winning. My mother filled that room quickly. She told relatives I had promised to pay. Then changed my mind because Madison looked too beautiful in her dress. Tyler told his friends I was weaponizing paperwork. Madison posted a photo of herself, crying into Tyler's chest, her left hand resting over her stomach. Her ring turned toward the camera. The caption said, We will still choose love. That was the line that finally made me put my phone face down. Love. They kept using clean words for dirty things. Love meant betrayal. Family meant payment. Grace meant silence. Fairness meant I should finance the people who humiliated me. I had spent my entire life letting them define the language around my pain. And suddenly I understood that the next fight would not be about a wedding. It would be about the story. Who got to tell it? Who got believed? Who got erased under soft lighting and white hearts? I knew enough from work to understand reputation damage. One bad public narrative could cost a person clients, promotions, friendships, peace. My job required me to sit across from executives and explain why documentation mattered before emotion entered the room. Now I had to give myself the same advice. Monday morning, I requested a personal day and drove to a copy shop near my office. I scanned every document in the black folder into a single digital file. I labeled each section by date. And a friend. And issue. Invoice naming me responsible. Venue contract with forged initials. Email from Tyler saying my card would cover the difference. Voicemails accusing me after the cancellation. Screenshots of Madison's public post. I was not building revenge. I was building a boundary strong enough to survive contact. Then I called Denise at the venue and asked whether she could provide a written statement confirming who had submitted the authorization paperwork and when. She sounded tired, but not surprised. "I can confirm records," she said. "I can't make accusations." That was enough. By noon, she sent an email stating the contract naming me as responsible had been submitted from my mother's email account, with payment authorization attached by my father, and no direct confirmation from me before the cancellation review. I read the email 3 times. Not because I needed more anger, but because I needed to let the truth become real in black and white. My family had always thrived in emotional fog. They counted on conversations happening in kitchens, on phone calls, in hallways, in places where they could later say, "I misunderstood." Paper was different. Paper did not care who cried prettier. Paper did not care who was pregnant. Paper remembered. That afternoon, my cousin Aaron called. I almost didn't answer, because every family call felt like a hand reaching through a locked window. But Aaron had never asked me to choose peace at my own expense. She lived in Salem, had 2 teenagers, and worked as a nurse, which meant she could detect emotional manipulation before most people finished their first sentence. When I answered, she said, "Before you say anything, I believe they did something." I sat down on the edge of my bed. Those 5 words hit harder than I expected. I believe they did something. Not what did you do, not can you fix it, not be the bigger person. Just belief. I told her enough. Not everything, but enough. She went quiet, then said, "Claire, Aunt Linda is planning a family dinner this Friday. She's telling people it's to clear the air." I almost laughed. Clear the air was my mother's favorite phrase when she had already poisoned the room. Aaron said the dinner was at my parents' house, and Madison wanted everyone there before they held a smaller ceremony at City Hall the next week. Apparently, my family had found a private dining room for a last-minute reception. But the embarrassment of losing the waterfront venue had become unbearable. They needed me present. They needed a confession. "They're going to ask you to apologize," Aaron said, publicly. I closed my eyes. I could see it already. My mother standing near the fireplace, Madison pale and trembling on the sofa, Tyler with his jaw set. My father saying this family needed healing. They would not ask me for truth. They would ask me to kneel in words. They needed the scapegoat back in position before Madison walked down any aisle. I told Aaron I wasn't going. She didn't argue. She only said, "I understand. But they're telling everyone you forged cancellation authority after promising payment." My eyes opened. That was new. That was more than social pressure. That was an accusation pointed straight at my career. In my industry, contract, integrity was everything. A rumor like that could follow me quietly, slipping into reference calls and professional relationships like smoke. That night, Tyler emailed me again. The subject line was, "Last chance to make this right." I almost deleted it, but my training won. I opened it. He wrote that he and Madison were willing to forgive me if I attended Friday's dinner, apologized to both families, and reimbursed my parents for the lost deposit. He added that if I refused, he couldn't control what people concluded about my behavior with the vendor paperwork. There it was. The threat, wrapped in adult language. I leaned back in my chair and felt the room narrow around me. Tyler had always been good at sounding reasonable while moving a knife closer. When we were together, he called it communication. If I questioned a female coworker texting him late at night, he said I was insecure. If I noticed Madison laughing too long at his jokes, he said I was jealous. Now he was doing it again. I forwarded Tyler's email to my personal archive, printed it, and placed it behind the venue statement. Then I wrote one reply. "I will attend Friday's dinner. I will bring documentation." I did not explain. I did not threaten. I did not defend myself. He responded 17 minutes later with, "Good. Please don't make this harder on Madison." I saved that too. People like Tyler cannot resist adding one more match to the pile. On Wednesday, my mother called from a number I hadn't blocked yet. I answered because I wanted to hear her tone. She was warm. That frightened me more than anger. "Honey," she said. "Friday is not an attack. It's a chance for everyone to move forward." I let her talk. She said my father had been losing sleep. Madison had cried herself sick. And Tyler was under tremendous pressure. She said I had always been compassionate under the stubbornness. Then she said the sentence I had been waiting for. "All you need to say is that you acted emotionally and misunderstood your role in the paperwork." I looked at the black folder on my table. Misunderstood. My forged initials were now a misunderstanding. Their invoice was a misunderstanding. Tyler's email about my card was a misunderstanding. "And if I don't?" I asked. Her voice cooled by a few degrees. "Then people may need to know you're not stable right now." I wrote that sentence down while she spoke. Not stable right now. Another clean phrase for a dirty purpose. My mother had never needed to hit me to make me flinch. She used concern like a blade wrapped in velvet. She could ruin me while sounding heartbroken. "Mom," I said. "Do you want the truth at dinner?" She paused. "I want peace." For the first time, I answered honestly. "Those are not the same thing." Thursday evening. Erin came to my apartment with takeout noodles and a portable scanner she used for insurance paperwork. We sat on my living room floor and went through the folder like two women preparing for a storm. She helped me arrange the documents in order. Not for drama, but for clarity. First came the original betrayal, the family messages asking for money. Then the forged documents. Then the cancellation authority. Then the public posts. Then the threats. Erin looked up from Tyler's email and said, "He's not as smart as he thinks he is." I smiled for the first time all week. He never was. Tyler had mistaken charm for intelligence for as long as I'd known him. He knew how to make people like him. How to make women feel chosen. How to make accountability sound cruel. But charm did not read contracts. Charm did not understand metadata. Charm did not know that every forwarded email carried a trail. I printed 3 copies of the packet. One for my parents. One for myself. One for anyone at that dinner who decided to accuse me without reading. On the final page, I added a simple statement. I would not pay for the wedding. I would not reimburse the deposit lost under a contract submitted without my consent. I would not apologize for canceling financial liability created through forged authorization. Any further public claims that I committed fraud would be answered with documentation. It felt strange to write boundaries in business language about my own family. But maybe that was what saved me. Emotion had always been their home field. Documentation was mine. I could not outcry Madison. I could not outguilt my mother. I could not outshout my father. I could not outcharm Tyler. But I could tell the truth in order. With dates, emails, and signatures. I could make the fog lift. Friday came too bright. I worked half a day because sitting still would have made me sick. At noon, my manager, Bria, asked if everything was okay. She was not a friend exactly, but she had the sharp eyes of a woman who had survived her own family. I told her only that a personal matter involving forged event paperwork might lead to someone contacting my workplace. She did not pry. She just said, "Send me what HR needs before they send us a story." That sentence nearly made me cry in the parking garage. Before they send us a story. She understood the order of things. Liars do not always arrive after the truth. Sometimes they arrive first. Smiling, with concern in their voices, I emailed HR a brief factual note with the venue statement and Tyler's threat attached. Just in case. It was not dramatic. It was protective. Another lock on another door. Et chasse patruzechpi. M. I parked across from my parents' house. The windows glowed warm. The same way they had when I was a kid coming home from school. Hoping Madison hadn't broken something and blamed me. Cars lined the curb. Relatives. Family friends. Tyler's parents. People who had eaten my mother's version of the story for a week. I sat in my car with the black folder on my lap and let myself shake for exactly 1 minute. Then I stopped. Not because I was no longer hurt. Because hurt could come with me without driving. I walked up the driveway where I had once helped Madison chalk hopscotch squares. Where Tyler had kissed me 2 summers earlier while my mother watched from the porch pretending not to smile. That porch used to mean belonging. Now it looked like a stage. I rang the doorbell instead of using my old key. My father opened the door. His eyes dropped to the folder. And for the first time, he looked unsure. Behind him, I could hear voices softening as people realized I had arrived. My mother appeared near the hallway mirror, wearing the gentle public face she saved for charity events and funerals. Madison sat on the sofa under a blanket. Tyler beside her with one arm around her shoulders. Everyone had their places. Claire, my mother said, sweetly enough to poison tea. We're so glad you came. I stepped inside and looked at the living room full of people who had been invited to witness my surrender. My aunt. My uncle. Tyler's parents. 3 cousins. Madison's godmother. My father's best friend from church. Aaron stood near the bookshelf. Arms crossed. Eyes steady on mine. That helped. One witness, who had not come hungry for my humiliation, my mother touched my elbow and guided me toward the center of the room. Before we eat, I think it would be healing if you said what you came to say. Madison lowered her eyes. Tyler stared at me with that controlled expression he used when he thought he had already won. My father stood by the fireplace like a judge without a courtroom. The room waited for me to break beautifully. I placed the black folder on the coffee table. The sound was small, but every face turned toward it. My mother's smile flickered. Claire, she said softly. Warning in every syllable. I looked at her. Then at my father. Then at Madison and Tyler. My voice, when it came, was calm enough to frighten even me. I'll say everything, I told them. But this time, I'm bringing the paperwork with me. I opened the folder slowly because speed would have made it look like anger. Anger was what they wanted. Anger could be dismissed. Softened. Translated into grief. Jealousy. Instability. Calm was harder to edit. I took out the first packet and placed it on the coffee table facing my parents. This is the invoice Mom sent me at 614 a.m. last Friday, I said. It names me as responsible for nearly $50,000 in wedding expenses I never agreed to pay. My mother's smile froze, but she kept it on her face like a cracked mask. Claire, this is not the time for documents. I looked around the room. At all the people she had invited to witness my apology. You made it the time, I said, when you told everyone I sabotaged a wedding because I was jealous. You turned this into a public matter. I'm simply making sure the public version includes dates. Tyler shifted beside Madison. This is family business, he said. His voice had that careful adult tone he used when trying to sound like the only sane person in the room. I turned to him and placed the second packet on top of the first. Then you shouldn't have emailed vendors telling them my card would cover the difference. His mother looked at him sharply. Tyler's mouth tightened. And for the first time, Madison stopped crying. My father stepped forward. Enough. Your mother and I were trying to keep things together. I handed him the venue statement. By submitting paperwork with my forged initials, he looked down. And his face changed before he could control it. That was enough for the room. Not a confession. Not a speech. Just the small collapse of a man seeing his own handwriting turned back toward him. Madison's godmother leaned forward and asked. Forged, my mother made a soft, wounded sound. As if the word itself had hurt her. That is a cruel exaggeration, she said. We filled out forms because Claire had verbally agreed to help. I had expected that. I placed the call log and text history beside the contract. There is no verbal agreement. There is one brunch where I said no, followed by invoices. pressure, and a contract submitted without me. Madison pulled the blanket higher over her stomach. You're doing this to humiliate me. Her voice was small, polished, familiar. It had worked on me for 30 years. It did not work that night. No, I said. I am doing this because you let them use my name to pay for your wedding to the man who cheated on me with you. The room went silent in a way silence had never been allowed to exist in my family. Tyler's father looked from his son to me. Is that true? Tyler opened his mouth. But Madison answered first. It wasn't like that. That was the closest she ever came to honesty. It wasn't like that. Not denial. Not accountability. Just a little door left open for excuses to crawl through. I looked at her and felt sadness. Real sadness. Because she still thought being pitied was safer than being honest. My mother reached for the folder. But Erin moved first. She picked up one copy and handed it to Madison's godmother. Then another to Tyler's mother. Everyone should read before they decide who's unstable, Erin said. My mother's eyes flashed at her. And for a second, the gentle public face disappeared. There she was. Not heartbroken. Furious. Not because I was lying, but because I had brought witnesses she could not manage. I played one voicemail. Only one. My father's voice filled the living room, saying I had never disappointed him more. Then my mother's voice. From another message. Telling me Madison could not survive stress, and I needed to fix what I had done. I stopped before the recording became cruel. I did not need to drown them. I only needed the room to hear the pattern. Guilt. Pressure. Accusation. Never apology. Tyler stood up. She canceled our wedding the night before. Whatever else happened. That was vicious. I looked at him. And for the first time since I found out about him and Madison, he seemed smaller than my memory of him. I canceled my financial liability. I said, you still could have married her. You just could not do it in a ballroom under my stolen name. His mother covered her mouth. His father asked Tyler if he knew my name was on the contracts. Tyler stared at the floor. Madison began crying again. But this time nobody rushed to soothe her. My mother tried. Of course. She sat beside Madison and said, this stress isn't good for the baby. I looked at her and said, then stop creating stress and calling it family. My father sank into the armchair near the fireplace. He suddenly looked old. Not in a way that made me soft, but in a way that made me understand how long cowardice can live inside a respectable man. We thought you would come around, he said. You always do. That sentence was the whole story. Not the forged forms. Not the wedding. Not Tyler. You always do. They had built their plan on the old version of me. I used to. I said, that's over. I took the final page from my folder and placed it in the center of the table. I will not pay for this wedding. I will not reimburse the lost deposit. I will not apologize for canceling charges attached to my name without consent. If anyone repeats that I forged, sabotaged, or acted unstable, they will receive this packet, including the venue statement and Tyler's email. Madison whispered. So you're just abandoning us. There it was. Dressed in tragedy. I almost smiled. No. I said. I'm returning responsibility to the people who created the situation. She looked at me as if I had spoken a language she had never been forced to learn. Maybe she hadn't. In our house. Responsibility had always skipped over her and landed on me. My mother stood. You will regret treating your family like enemies. I gathered the folder, leaving the copies behind. No. Mom. I regret treating enemies like family for as long as I did. That was the only sentence that made her flinch. Not the documents. Not the recordings. That sentence. Because underneath all her performance, she knew exactly how much truth it carried. I left before dinner was served. Nobody stopped me. On the porch. I paused with my hand on the railing. That porch had been in so many childhood memories that I used to confuse it with safety. Birthday candles through the window. Madison's chalk drawings on the steps. My father teaching me to tie my shoes. My mother calling me helpful when she meant obedient. I stood there and finally let the place become only wood, paint, and a locked door behind me. The smaller wedding happened 9 days later at City Hall. I know because Aaron told me. Not because I asked. Tyler's parents attended. But they did not pay for a reception. My parents went, stiff and smiling in photographs that looked more like proof of attendance than joy. Madison wore a short white dress and cropped every picture carefully so the courthouse hallway looked softer than it was. She did not tag me. My mother posted one last vague message about forgiveness and betrayal. I did not respond. Then Aaron commented, "Forgiveness requires truth." The post disappeared within an hour. After that, the family group chat got quiet. Silence from people who once used noise to control me felt strange at first. Then it felt like air. I blocked Tyler. I muted my parents. I kept Madison unblocked only long enough to save one final message accusing me of ruining her perfect day. At work, nothing happened. That was a victory people don't make movies about. But it mattered. No rumor reached my desk before the truth did. HR acknowledged my note and told me I had handled the matter appropriately. Priya brought me coffee the next morning and said, "I'm glad you documented." I almost laughed. Because that was the closest thing to a blessing I had received all month. 3 months later, my father mailed me an envelope with no return address. Though I knew his handwriting. Inside was a check for the amount of the lost deposit, and a note that said, "This should settle things." I did not cash it. I mailed it back with one sentence written under his. "Money settles invoices. Not trust." He never replied. For once, I was grateful. My mother tried calling on Thanksgiving. I let it go to voicemail. She said she missed her daughters being together. As if geography had separated us instead of betrayal. She said Madison was tired. The baby was coming soon. And family should not stay broken over money. I deleted the message after saving a copy. Not because I planned to use it. But because I had learned to keep proof until people stopped rewriting pain. I don't hate Madison. That surprises people when I say it. Hate would still be a kind of attachment. And I have given that family enough of my energy. I hope her child grows up loved without being used as a shield. I hope Tyler learns that charm is not character before he teaches someone else to confuse the two. I hope my parents one day sit in a quiet room and understand what they traded for the appearance of peace. But hope is not access. That is the lesson I had to learn the hard way. You can wish people healing from a distance. You can love a memory without reopening a door. You can feel grief without mistaking it for obligation. Family can explain where you came from. But it does not get unlimited permission to decide what you deserve. For years, I thought being strong meant absorbing the blow and staying kind afterward. I thought silence made me mature. I thought walking away from conflict meant I was better than the people who created it. Now I understand something sharper. Sometimes, strength is a chain lock. Sometimes maturity is a folder full of facts. Sometimes peace begins the moment you stop funding your own disrespect. I still keep the black folder in the bottom drawer of my desk. I don't open it often. I don't need to. The folder is not a weapon anymore. It is a reminder. My family handed me a contract because they thought my name was something they could use. They forgot a name also belongs to the person willing to defend it. And the night before their wedding, I did not ruin anything that belonged to them. I simply took back what belonged to me. I used to think being strong meant staying quiet, while people who claimed to love me used my kindness as permission. But that night taught me something different. Peace does not begin when everyone forgives you. Sometimes, peace begins when you stop paying for your own disrespect. My family thought they had taken my money, my dignity, and my voice. In the end, all I did was take my name back.